Um, lately, the only name that people
Okay,
call me.
you're going live now.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Again, welcome, Theda. Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you, Robert Johnston. Thank you, Crazy Raven. Welcome to Native Wellness Institute's Wellness Wednesday. And oh my God, I just 135 weeks. I just marvel at that. And sometimes, so we welcome you. I'll introduce myself just in case you hadn't don't know who in the heck I am. I don't know who in the heck I am on some days, but that's okay. So Nistu, that means I am. Nidaniko means my name is Mokoyo Sukoi. And it's because I told the dream to Roger Prairie Chicken about that I had, most of you know, on Halloween, I like to dress up as Bigfoot and go into the forest and make some videos. But I had a wolf's outfit and I put it on and I pulled it up to right about here. And so this part was human, but the bottom part was just fierce. And I had strong legs and I was just fierce. And I looked over and I saw, and they were my ancestors, but they were my relatives. And, they didn't have a gender. I couldn't tell if they were male or female, but they all had, some of them had stand-up headdresses and they had the head of the wolf. And so when I looked at the wolf, I knew I had this moment, and it's Gene, like in your dreams, I had this hesitation of like uncertainty, or for a moment like a doubt. And I don't want to use the word English doubt, but I had this doubt. But I knew if I took that head of that wolf and put it on, that I would be a real wolf. And so my second name, and I say that because that's who I am, or that's who I'm transforming into. I'm only 5 years old in that name. And so it's transforming out of the other name that I had into this name. But I'm also we have many team members with Native Wellness Institute. So I'm just part of the bigger team. We have some fantastic people who we keep growing. We keep bringing in younger people. We lose some of our elders, and some days me and Gene think we're elders. Some days I think we haven't grown up yet. So I'll say it. My motto is never too late to have a happy childhood. So I'm coming to you, and this is a weird. My land acknowledgement is I'm on land that was never taken. I thought about that today when I was driving in. It was warming up to 0, and I was just being real cautious, and I light a smudge when I come over the mountains, and I just said, hey, we've always been here, and they never took this mountain away. It's still our mountain. So I'm coming from the Blackfoot Confederacy, and I'm actually coming from the woman who gave me life, Scriptadaki, Yellow Flower Woman. She's at her doctor's appointment, which went great. She has some great health, and she's 84. But this is her bedroom, and I said we have a Wi-Fi thing around here, so I just ran over here and said, Mom, can I use your bedroom? So I hope she doesn't have anything. I mean, you could kind of tell Mom has all her Sundance stuff hanging, all her favorite Sundance painters. She has a bunch of flowers here, real flowers that she's growing, and she has pictures of us. She used to have pictures of Elvis Presley, but she kind of took them down, and we got she used to have these big old pictures of Elvis Presley, and then our pictures are kind of about this size, but now I see she has May Tallow, she has her parents, and she has a picture when she was about 8 years old. I just kind of like this because she says she likes to wake up and look at all her loves. And so that's where I'm coming. So that's a little bit of my introduction. So I'll pass it to you, Dean. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Theda. And as you're introducing yourself, their topic. Again, everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome to the Native Wellness Institute Power Hour or Wellness Wednesdays. We've been going at this since the beginning of the pandemic. Just as as our people are traumatized, we wanted to re-traumatize with the pandemic, but we're also, how can we bring that healing? How can we bring that love, that spirit, the culture, traditions, in whatever form it is, to the people? And so that's why we developed the Native Wellness Institute, developed the Power Hours. And again, I don't have no idea how many we've done, Theta. And we've been on it a lot. And so welcome whoever's out there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And just just to take a time right now for you just to give thanks wherever you're at. Um and I love, Theda, your introduction, because our topic today is like storytelling, telling stories of healing and hope. And as Theda was sharing her introduction, she was sharing with us her story. And as she was sharing with us also where she's at, her mom's bedroom, and also sharing us with, and if you look around, I'm looking around the background of your mom's bedroom, it's all about what's important to her, what has significance, what has value, and she's telling her story just with her bedroom and everything that's in her bedroom. I'm sure everything that, if you grab something, everything has a story associated with it. And so what are those stories that run our beingness, our identity, our spirit, and what are those? And part of it too is, again, our introductions. And I had the blurry thing in the back for my background. I took that off because I wanted people to see where I'm at too. I'm sitting in my truck right now, and up on top of the mountain, towards Crystal Mountain up here, towards Mount Rainier, or Mount Tahoma, as the traditional name of the mountain is. And as I'm up here, and my land acknowledgement is of the original inhabitants of this land where I'm sitting on right now. To make that land acknowledgement, I want to acknowledge the beautiful spruce trees. I want to acknowledge the mountain flowers and the plains, or the grasses, the grass fields up here. I want to acknowledge the deer that ran through this here land, the elk that traveled through here, and the bear, and the birds that traveled through here as well, and the rivers and the lakes that are up here. I want to make that land acknowledgement of the original inhabitants of this land that I am sitting on right now in the parking lot in my truck, and up on this mountain. And so that's the land acknowledgement I'm making. And those who I haven't even talked about, the insects, and who the original inhabitants of this land I'm sitting on right now. And in the shadow of Mount Tahoma here, the place where the water originates from, and so it's good to be here. My name is Gene Tagaban. My Tlingit name is Gayal. I'm of the Duck Danton clan, the Raven Freshwater Sockeye clan from Hoona, Alaska, the child of a Wishkatan Eagle Shark clan from Mahuan and Juneau, Alaska. I'm Cherokee, Tlingit, and Filipino. I tell people I'm a Cherokee Tlingitino. I like to eat my salmon with rice and cornbread. And my last name Tagaban is Filipino. My father was Tlingit Filipino, and he in the Philippines is pronounced as Tagaban. But my grandfather comes from the city of Bantoc, and my great-grandfather comes from the province of Ilocos Norte in the Philippines. My mama, who is full-blood Cherokee or Schlagi, her Schlagi name, Cherokee name is Week. I'm of the Wolf clan on that side. She was born in Jay, Oklahoma, raised in Xena, and before this, the Trail of Tears that is known as, my people come from a place that is now known as Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. And again, it's good to be here. And part of my introduction too, I want to introduce is my partner, my wife, Ruby. She is of Aani and Nakota and Northern Italian heritage, and I introduce her too because as I'm sharing with you my introduction or my story, she is part of my story. and she is part of my story of healing and hope as well. Because of the support that she gives me, and vice versa. And so what are those stories of healing and hope that you may be carrying out there, to think about it? Because our life is a story. Our life is a story. But what makes up our life story are the moments. And what are those moments in your life story that we can take a look at and find those gems of healing and hope? Oftentimes, there's a lot of people who have that story of the trauma. Yes, we have those stories,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that too is part of our story of resilience, of strength. And are we, but are we using that story to be a victim, or
Mm.
or what is that? How are we using those? But find those moments in our life story, those gems that we can choose to take a look at,
Mm.
and find those stories out there in our communities and our life. But in order to find those stories, not only outwardly we need to look like this, but inwardly too, in our mind's eye, at our own selves, our own stories, to take a look at it, to have the courage and vulnerability for ourselves. So anyways, that's a little bit of my introduction. I get a little long-winded there, Theda, as we keep going on, but there's so much there when we start talking about our story. So what are you thinking right now?
I think that's perfect. Just how I mean, I know you, but I learn something different each time. Each time I listen to your story. And I guess that's what Native Wellness Institute is asking of you, is to listen differently,
uh
and listen differently to see how whoever you're listening to has transformed. And I think that when you listen and differently, you may just let go of any kind of other ideas you had. You might even have forgiveness. You might even say, dang, I didn't know they did that. Wow, look at what they survived. Wow, look at what they're doing now. And so that listening is when you really hear, and it's more to hear with your heart than because like our brains are so miraculous, they're so fantastic. They can analyze, they can do all kinds of things, but or I think we're asking you today to listen with your heart. And so, Gene, I was just saying my prayers because I'm trying to be spontaneous. So I guess last night I'll just share a story and it's of hope and healing, because we couldn't go across the border to Alberta, and a lot of our relatives couldn't come across this border. And it's not like the southern border, but what we did to still stay connected is we made a support group meeting. It was a 12-step meeting, and it was done by a grandma, and she's one of those grandmas. Her name is Ramona Bighead. She's always just done stories with kids, nappy stories. I think she was thinking about doing a Shakespeare play with the kids, just about behavior. And so she started this group like right at the beginning. It used to be in person, but and then she just contacted me like early pandemic and said, we're on every Tuesday at 8:00. and it has a format, but last night I loved going on at 8:00 because I had been traveling and I'd been missing time zones, and I just saw the crew that I had seen all during the pandemic. And then one of the stories, it's anonymous, but one of the stories that, and I was glad that Robert helped us. It was of a young man who was a coach, and this young man struggles with addiction, and he was just coming back from he shared with that he got despondent by losing a sibling. And we were talking about that, Gene. There was just too much loss, and the grief, it just weighed him down. So he relapsed and he drank. But the hope came when he tried to push everyone away, and then he his friends came, his other that played ball with him, that grew up with him, and they just told him, get up, get up, fix you something to eat, knock it off. Get up, I'm gonna sit with you, knock it off, you're loved, you're too damn talented, you have too much skill, knock this shit off. Kind of, and it started, making him hot tea, making him coffee, giving him food, and that was the people that loved and cared for him. So part of what Gene and I are asking you today is listen, and maybe you need to go and grab someone, who's on the pity pot, because sometimes they say, if you're saying, oh, pour me, pour me, pour me, pour me another drink, that's that kind of, that's not who we are as Native people. That's not who we are. So the story is he's back. They gave him the coaching job. And that day when he came, he said he kept yawning, and he goes, I said, I just had the best day. I had the best day. He said, my skill is teaching young men. I know it's hard, and I know they look at me sideways, and I was teaching them how to get in condition. And you got to be patient, you got to be persistent, and you cannot back off. You just have to move forward. Yeah, I know your muscles hurt. Yeah, I know that's up, but no, I'm gonna push you. And he said, so I had this group of young men who just looked up to me as the coach, and just looked up to me, and just like looked at me, and they were doing what I asked them to do. And some of them were looking for that man figure that could do that to them in that way. And so that, and for me personally, our meeting always runs over. Sometimes it's an hour and a half, hour, 35 minutes, 40, but I lost track of time. And I know Gene and I have talked about that before, is when you're doing something and you're really listening, you lose track of time. You really lose. And so we're asking you to get in that space, and it's, not to go too far in the future or pick up the stuff from the past. Just try to stay present, and look for that story. So that's what I was thinking. What you thinking, Gene?
I was thinking about, I mean, you talk about time, and and sometimes time can be yeah, we just lose that track of time. There's a word for it, that but we're in it. It's like it's almost time traveling. We're almost time travelers, and such. And so our stories, when I'm thinking about that too, our stories, um, gosh, sometimes our stories they can heal us, and sometimes they can they're destructive. They can actually, our stories that they can kill us, or we could die from it. When you were talking about sobriety, about how so many of us hold the story of the drunken Indian, and we hold on to that story. Even when somebody comes up to us and talks, and sometimes it's like we go, oh man, I don't want to talk to them. They're always asking for money now, and they're always asking for this and that. But then they come up, that's a story we're telling ourselves. But then they come up to you, so and so comes up to you, and they go, hey, I've been sober now for like about 6 months, but the story that we're running in our minds is that there's that drunken Indian again. And it could be your cousin, it could be your relative, it could be a family member or community member. In Indian country, Native country, we're all related anyway. So it's like, so if they come up to you, and again, it's the stories that we run in our minds, and then they come up, and they've actually started to rewrite their own personal story. I'm sober now.
Ah,
I've been sober for 6 months. I'm rewriting that story of, I'm not going to be the drunken Indian. I am going to be the warrior.
Ah,
And
ah,
so there's and stories are played out in that way so many times. And then we also have the stories of ourselves that we play within our own, that I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough. I always tell the story about my grandmother. My grandmother, she has since passed, she has passed several years now, but she went to boarding school, and she went to boarding school, I'd say probably in the 20s, early 20s. And when she went to boarding school, they dressed her up, and she maybe about 6 years old or so, and they had the little Dutch boy haircut, and
uh,
they had
yeah.
the dresses that looked like the gunny sacks, and the pictures behind them were about um, uh, a dozen little girls, all with the same haircut, the same expressionist look on their face, and with those the I don't even know what you call them, the nuns, the sisters, the pastors, whoever, whatever you call them, were and standing behind them, all with expressionless looks of. They always look like they're angry, like they're like just back there, and standing behind them on this picture. So my grandma went to boarding school, and this is and so I still have that picture of her. But
Ah,
in that story of hers, she came out of the boarding school with the storyline of I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough,
mm,
I'm ugly, I'm less than. The culture is less than. The culture is is worthless. She came out of that boarding school with that, and with her little mind still developing.
yeah.
You know, and then she had a child at a very early age. And what happened with her, that hurt and that harm and the wounds that she carried with her through her life. As she
Mm,
continued through her life, she ended up um, having her own business as a beauty salon. And everyone went there and stuff. In fact, that's how I learned how to sit still, because every time I had my hair cut, I go to grandma and she always said, sit still, or I'm going to cut your ear off. I'm like, and you're a little kid, I'm going to sit still because I don't want my ear to get cut off. I'm like, going,
right,
holy. So I'm like, learn how to sit really still as grandma's cutting your hair, you know,
right.
and, and it's not really cut. I always got my hair buzz cut when I was like a little kid, and I got mad because they always let my brother grow long hair, and I always had to grow mine short, and as the oldest boy. I don't know what that was about. That story is about, but I should ask my parents, but anyways, my grandma, she had her own beauty salon. She had her own employees. She had her own
Ah,
building. And then
yeah.
after that, she bought a hotel, the grandma, or the Tagaban building, they called it. And she bought this hotel apartment, and they and below it they had a barber shop down there and stuff. She bought this. And so she was a successful business person. But it wasn't until she finally got her GED when she was about 67 years old, where something flipped in her story,
Yeah.
and she said that I am smart enough,
Mm,
I am worthy, I am
mm,
beautiful, I am strong, that I can do these things. Here, she was a business owner, all these things in her life. But it wasn't until that time where she finally, she started teaching the culture and traditions. She started making regalia for her grandchildren, her great grandchildren. But that's when the story and her story flipped.
ah,
And she finally, she got her GED. Then she went to school because she wanted to get a degree in college,
mm,
because she knew that she could do it now.
yeah.
But she passed on before she got that. But it's interesting, again, the stories that we carry with us. And oftentimes too is this we don't flip the switch in the story until maybe it's like um, a near-death experience,
Mm, mhm, mhm.
an illness, or another relative goes through an illness or dies or passes away.
Yes.
You know, don't wait till that time. Don't
Mm,
wait until that moment. You know, we could flip that switch now. We could flip whatever it is that turn the page to the chapter, because you, as I told the healing story of my grandma, whoever's listening to us right now, you are a healing story.
yes. Yes.
You are a healing story. Even those who are behind closed doors, still drinking and smoking, there is a healing story.
Yes.
They made it to this point. Now it's like, okay, how can we flip that story? You know, and so when I'm thinking about these healing stories, sure, we have our traditional stories. We have Raven, you know, Coyote, Killer Whale stories, the traditional stories. Look into those stories because they're always there if we
Mm-hmm.
take a look. But those stories, our healing stories of
Mm-hmm.
perseverance and resiliency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, and think about that. You know, and those who are maybe you're driving or maybe you're at your own house, take a look at your children or your grandchildren. Those are healing stories right there.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, I love those.
Yeah. Gosh, Gene, just you triggered thoughts on the GEDs and our people when they get them or when they flip that switch. One of my mentors used to tell me, never be irritated with anyone, never be frustrated. Look at that person and imagine them when they were a baby, and then imagine them when they're in the last days of their life. So from that innocent baby,
Mm.
and then when they're going to transition and cross over, or walk into the forest or go over the Milky Way, and that they're actually there in front of you because Creator has created a situation. They're going to teach you something. So it's better to look for the lesson and not be irritated by their behavior. So I think about that. But when you said like your grandmother, I mean, I like when you talk about her because I see who you are. I mean, I see who you are, and we are them. Whether we want to know it or not. We're
Hmm.
like, but I think the healing and hope is that each generation got better,
Ah,
better at things, better at healing. Because both my parents, had both tragic boarding school experiences, and so they didn't finish high school, and it wasn't and dad never could get his GED, even though dad was insanely intelligent, but it was one of those, he would study and we'd even help him study, we were his kids, the math part, and would be helping dad study, and he'd be all ready to go and he knew all the answers, but he would get drunk the night before the test.
oh,
And the thing is that finally he just kind of gave up on it and just did life in a good way, and he was sober that last 20 years, and he started doing all the things he liked, making willow furniture. He made a horsehide drum for me. It says to Theta from dad, and my friend Kevin had fixed it, and I'm going to bring it next week. We're going to be in Arizona, 6, 7, and 8 Native Wellness Institute. So you can come join us. We're doing our second in person, but I'm going to bring it there, and I'll let you look at it. But dad, he had a good life. Even, he had tuberculosis, only one lung. He lived as long as he could. And he would, like your dad, he kind of smoked till the end. I mean, only one lung, but it was like, that's dad. And, and
mhm.
but I guess I want to share a short story of what our mom taught us, because there she after she raised us to her goal was that we were independent, and I got that, like, so I moved out with when I was 17, got my own place, and was in college and stuff, and I see that now, that what makes her happy is that we're independent.
Mm.
But she had a group of friends, and they were all like, they were from the Southwest. One, she was part Hopi and Lakota. And there was about 8 of them, and they were in an experiment, like a cohort, where they went to, they got their GED all together, if they didn't have it, and they went to college and they got their mental health degree.
Mm.
And, but it was like, they all had families. Mom had us. And, by that, most of it, she was a single parent. I remember her working 3 jobs and, doing that kind of, when you're just that avid parent. But she also said something the other day, she said, and she never said that before. She said, I chose to stay single because, she said, I just didn't want to bring a stepfather into the picture, because I'd heard these bad statistics, or I didn't want to bring that element. So I made a conscious choice to stay single until you all moved out of the house. She did. That was, and so, 50% of our women are single parents, and we have single fathers now who, we'd have to talk to them. But, well, these 8 people, so I remember they all had like these psychology classes, and they all had and of course they had a lot of them didn't have vehicles, or they had Indian cars that didn't run, and all of that. So they got them their own vehicle that would help, that they would all go to each other's house and pick each other up and go to school together. I mean, it was like and then if someone like tried to quit, or like, oh, this math is too hard, or whatever they had, they would just go in their house and they go, no, you can't quit. You can't quit. We're trying. We think you could do it. We love you. Get your ass out of that bed and come back into the math class. Come back to the psychology class. But I just remember hearing stories. Yeah, so-and-so, he was going to kind of backslide, but we went and got him. They all graduated together. So they all graduated together with this mental health degree. And they were so successful because they were the first brown social workers that looked just like the natives that came in. And because they look like them, act like them, it's just like how we like all of the, the native series and shows like Reservation Dogs. But we like to see our own people. But they all became mental health counselors, and some went on to, get higher degrees. And they started programs, like when they started the treatment program. I remember one of the graduates, he would just go cruise the street and pick up Indian. I mean, his name was Francis Allen, and he'd say they look like they wanted to sober up, and he'd talk them, and somehow he'd just like walk with them, listen to their story. He would listen to their story, Gene. He would let them tell their story, and then he'd say, well, why don't you come in and have some coffee? The next thing they'd have coffee. Next thing they'd be in the treatment program. And a lot of those guys and women sobered up. And then as they went along, if they had 6 months, a year and a half, then they'd hire them. They'd give them a job. And then they helped the next one. So there was like this ripple effect. And, I was just thinking the things but we were her kids and we were watching her. And, and she wore that black cap and gown, and it wasn't beaded back then, that they didn't beat him, but that our mother, who went to boarding school, and she used to say things like us. She said, over my dead body, will you go to boarding school? Because of her experience. And so it set us in gear. I mean, like I from a young age just knew I was going to go to college. There was no ifs, ands, buts about it. It's like, in the 1978 walk, I was a radical advocate, started going on the walk, and man, something in my stomach, when you're in your story, your instinct will tell you something. And I knew if I went on that walk, I went and finished my degree. So I turned around and went back to school. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. What you thinking, Gene? I know, or what you thinking?
Oh, I'm just reflecting again. it's one of those things too, is like, those who are listening, thank you again. We're the Native Wellness Institute here with Wellness Wednesday, Gene Tagaban and Theda New Breast, and shout out to our producer Robert Johnston, who's out, in the background back there, putting this, helping us and assisting us and with this as well. Um, um, and we're talking today about just stories of healing and hope, and what are those stories? And we can't help but when we hear other people sharing their stories, telling their stories, a talk story, that we can't help in our own mind, our own experience, frame of reference, we start reflecting on our own stories. We start reflecting on our who we are. We start reflecting when we talk about mom, we can't help but start thinking about our mom, or our fathers, or relatives or cousins, or I remember a time when so and so, or I remember this time when I was walking down the street, and those things. And so when you were talking about, sharing that, your Theta, I was reflecting on, I my experience of going to, right after high school. I barely made out of high school, and I think they just passed me because they just wanted me out of that school. They just said, we've had enough of you. We're going to pass you. This is what you need. Get out of here, and go. And to be honest with you, I truly believe that many of them thought that, okay, this kid's not going to make much of himself. There's another drunken Indian, the story of the drunken Indian. We just get him out of the school, get him, he'll like, we'll just, who knows, goodbye, see you later, bye. And it was years later when I'm walking through that school, my high school in Juneau, Alaska, and I had some of those old teachers who were still there, and they saw me. They say, "What are you doing here? Who are you? Do they know that you're here? Do you have a permission slip to be here?" And they probably even called the principal or called security, whatever, that, hey, we have this guy here. And when they asked me, what are you doing here? I said, I work here now. I'm working with the kids. I'm working with these students. And what happened was in the high school was, they actually gave me a room where do whatever that you want with that room. So it was in a big room. So I set up the big drum in the middle of the room. And instead of chairs, I said, get all the chairs out of here. Get all the chairs out of here. I want all pillows. I want all cushions in this room. And this is the room where people can come to and be safe. Lunchtime, they can come in and eat their lunch. Lunchtime, we'll sing around the drum and stuff. And what was really cool was that the room was right across from the teacher's lounge because they wanted to keep an eye on who was going in and out of the room. And so I say at lunchtime, I said, okay. And we would like just start pounding on that drum, start singing away, and then the teachers would come in, hey, keep it down in here. We're trying to like have our break to lunch over here too. And I said, hey, we'll just close the door. We're going to keep, you do whatever you do in there. We're going to do whatever we're doing in here, man. And so, and some of those old teachers are going, this guy, he still hasn't changed. He's just still doing the same thing. But that's all part of that story too, right?
Yeah.
That in their minds, here's this, they still saw me as this high school, troublemaker, broke the rules, didn't follow the rules, and now he's back and is still not following our rules.
Yeah.
And our rules
Yeah.
is still causing trouble for us, as opposed to what's beneficial for the kids, the students, and so one of those things I tell that is like, because when I did go to, is that sometimes our own personal stories will follow us.
Yeah.
Especially in my hometown of Juneau, Alaska. They follow us, until people finally see that, oh, okay, this person there's something to this person now. In school, we just thought we were going to kick him out. There's another drunk Indian. We're going to get him out of here. But no, now he's like doing something in the community. or
Yeah.
doing something for the people. But the thing is, I myself had to accept that story as well, that I have changed, that I'm growing, that I am healing, I'm developing, I'm evolving.
Mm,
I myself had to stop feeding into this story of whatever they thought, whatever they saw. And part of my story was like, oh, the hell with you, man. I'm going to show you.
uh,
Always still that defiant person. I'm going to show you. And even though just I graduated from high school and I did go to college, but it didn't make sense to me because I spent 12 years trying to get out of school. Now I'm going back to school. And that was my frame of thinking when I was that age, my late teens, early 20s. And I had a teacher who said, no, Gene, some people go to college and they succeed. Some people, they succeed by just experiencing life.
mm, mhm.
Go out, experience a life. You will struggle in this structure of college. And so that's what I did. But he said also, but you need to like focus whatever you're going to learn. You have to still
Mm,
educate yourself
mm.
because your system wants to learn. You're bright, you're intelligent, but what are you going to educate yourself with?
Yes.
And so I went with that mind frame, that story line, that I'm going to go out there, get experience, but I'm going to learn. What can I learn? Because
Yeah, yeah.
if we don't focus our education, learning on something, our system will, the environment will teach us anyways, because we want to learn. And so that's how I've got my education, and my learning, and sharing that too. So what are we focusing on? And all that has to do is like, what is your story?
Yeah.
Are you going to feed into what everybody else says or society or the stereotypes on again, as Indian people, what our story is? Or are you going to rewrite that?
Mm, mhm.
Are you going to rewrite that and see the possibilities and actually like feel the resilience, the strength, the spirit, that belief that our story is that we are our ancestors' dreams. We have been dreamt into existence.
Yes.
And that we are intelligent. And even though some of the greatest stories I've gotten were like when I sat there in my education, were sitting with those who are on the streets, who are deep in their alcoholism,
Mm,
and
mhm.
all they want to do is be acknowledged. As you
Mm.
walk by, they say, "Hey, cola, hey, you got a smoke or something?" Never ask me for money. They always ask me for a smoke. Hey, got a smoke? And I said, "I don't have a smoke, man, but let me get you a cup of coffee." And I would sit with them and just listen to them.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the pieces of wisdom that they had to share with me were just gems, gems. They may have gone on the street. They may be died on the street, died of their alcoholism, but that doesn't mean that they didn't have insight. That they didn't have like knowledge. They didn't have It's like some of our most brilliant people are there.
Mhm.
Anyways, those stories too. I mean, it's like
Yeah. No, Gene, you always say that our stories are someone else's survival manual.
uh
And that is so true. As I was reflecting, I think I wanted to talk about, I came in the house and Lori Lori had boiled some tongue. It's
uh
got it's got horseradish, so it's like my reward for after. I won't be munching on it right now, but I was just thinking, why do I like, boiled tongue? And I like boiled, buffalo tongue, boiled beef tongue. and
I
it just
okay, okay, Thea, I got to tell you this.
yeah.
Every time I went back to Alaska, and my father asked me, what can I cook for you for your for dinner, or if I was out there on my birthday, what can I cook for you for my birthday dinner? It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
tongue. It was tongue. I love it.
And so I was just marveling at, like some people go to their mom's house and they like cookies or brownies or whatever, but But Kathy was telling me the story. She goes, "Did you hear what happened yesterday?" And I go, "No, we've just been kind of. I was supposed to pick up our elk today, and what'll happen? It didn't happen today. So like I'm kind of at the bottom. If you can see how I'm dressed like a Babylonian, wool socks, snow pants. I got my 20 below mucks on, and but I kind of just put some hairspray. So this is the authentic bushy head Babylonian. But I was thinking about the story of what we like to eat.
Oh yeah.
And the hope and the healing, because I thought, because I took a couple of bites while I was getting ready to get on with you and Robert Johnson. And as soon as I tasted it, as soon as I swallowed it, as soon as it felt like my spirit perked up.
Mm.
And then I thought, and I'm at the point in my life where I really like to chew things like maybe 25, 30 times. Because they say, if your life is not an emergency, you shouldn't gulp. And when you gulp, that's when the bacteria forms, and that's how the cancers. So I was sitting there going, chewing it. And I just thought, I think this is spirit food.
Soul food.
I just like what you were saying, and then I had to it's that God grant me and let me accept what I can't change, because in the scheduling, because we're going to be traveling to Arizona for Native Wellness Institute. All of our team will be there. I was getting ready to do that, so this was the day that I could go pick up the processed elk. And it'll happen. It's just that our sister, and that's a success story. She has her own processing plant. She even camouflaged, packages all of your meat, buffalo, beef, elk, moose. But her mom is going through some health issues. And so she had to take care of her mom. And so I just completely switched gears. So, I'm not going to be irritated or upset. It's just like, okay, well, you go to plan B, plan C. That's more important, and we'll get it. But I was imagining, because I had made room in the I'd made room in the freezer. Like, I'm gonna put all the elk hamburger in this part right here, and I'm gonna put the elk roast right here, and then right in the middle, I want to keep track of the elk steaks. And so, I'm just, and then I had shared, I also want a buffalo, but that I'm going to do in the spring. And I was just thinking, so that story of the hope and healing, it is what you eat.
Yeah.
The spirit, the spirit plate you make, what you offer out. And so, maybe, after you get off sometime today, all of you out there, go make what was your favorite dish of your dad or your mom or your grandparents, especially if you lost a child. If you've lost a child, or even, some of you lost animals. I lost Ocon. I've been giving all goodies to the foxes. Mm. What I would give to, because, and I it's the spirit food. And I think that's part of the renewal and the hope and the regenerating with the food. Because like when I was coming in on Duck Lake, I saw one of the herds of the buffalo, and they were just running, and they were just fierce. And one was running along the electric fence, kind of calculating how it could get out, and so I just started praying to them, Ini, no gaikimoket, no gaspomoket, pity me, help me. Whichever buffalo I'm going to get in the spring, can you please just go tell them that it will be used for good things, that the hide will be used for good things, that the meat will be used for good things, that the tongue will be used for good things. And one of my relatives, she wants the gallbladder for some kind of ceremony. So, I mean, this isn't, I don't have the kind of relatives that say, oh, get me a diamond ring. So could you give me the gallbladder?
Give me the tongue. I want the tongue.
They'll say, who gets the scrotum? Because the scrotum, like when you blow them up and let them dry, they're the best tobacco pouches.
Uh,
and it's so it's like, who gets the scrotum? I mean, you know, so I guess the story of the buffalo, I'll just pass it back to you in a minute. But they were saying they 140 uses for the buffalo, that we had. The Europeans had just a couple of uses, and but I just look at it. But what about the spirit of it, Gene? What about the spirit? Because since I've been praying, doing these prayers, and even this how it, the lottery, the other one of the descendants, we're giving a buffalo to one of our descendants, one of our enrolled members. I'm the elder, and then a descendant. Because even though the federal government has these recognitions, we love our descendants and we see them. And this is like one of the first. So they even threw all the descendants' name in a computer, and the computer just chose it. So to be fair, not someone who could choose their relatives. I mean, so one of our descendants gets a buffalo too. And I was just like, right on, man. We're changing the narrative. We're changing the story. We are including everybody. We're not, excluding someone, so that's part of, the story
that's
going,
funny.
going on with the buffalo. Anyway, you can tell I probably, what do you think, Gene?
I'm just thinking that's like some of these old elders are like going, who's that little person that's inside that machine there who's picking these? Oh, who's that? There's somebody who's that little person? Just like that Indian in the cupboard. That Indian in the cupboard. I wish I had a little Indian in the cupboard. Now we have Indian in this machine here. Holy, you know.
I know.
I
Oh
love
my
those
God.
those stories, but it's you know, and again, those who are out there, we got out, but part of it too is, those you're anticipating and looking forward to that buffalo hunt that you got, and you're already making plans, and you're already creating the storyline in your mind too before it even happens. It's happening, but you're creating that. It's like my brother and I just talked to him recently, and next year we're planning a hunt up in Alaska. He's going, let's go hunting. Let's go up there hunting. Let's go hunting. Let's go. And I said, yep, let's go. And just for a deer hunt. And and so I'm already playing it in my mind and anticipating. With
Yeah.
that, I just want to say too is like, next week we're meeting in Arizona at the Great Wolf Lodge, the Native Waters Institute, for our second live in-person gathering. And we're all as a team, we've already been thinking about the storyline, anticipating that moment of of actually meeting and being there and seeing each other and everybody else too. And so it's one of those things. And our storylines, what are you anticipating and doing out
Yeah.
there? What are
Yeah.
your goals? What do you have up? I'm a bike rider. I'm looking for some bike. I'm looking forward to bike riding and then those things, and it keeps me going. It gives me something to look forward to.
Mm. Hmm.
And just like, and so what are those for you out there who are listening? What are those stories that you're looking to create, those moments, those memories, and
Mm.
and part of the, I mean, and again, next week we're going to be meeting together in Great Wolf Lodge is it in Phoenix or Scottsdale? Where is that place?
I think it's Scottsdale.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
Scottsdale. We'll be
Mhm.
there we start on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and just we're talking about health, wellness, hope, healing, and during this time of just
Mm.
coming together and just laughing and celebrating, dancing, singing our songs,
Mm-hmm.
and doing those things. And so it's um, I want to encourage those. Take a look. Join us next week. Well, I look forward to seeing you. Theda looks forward to seeing you. And the Native Waters Institute team, we look forward to seeing you and creating some more of those sacred moments in our life story. There's those stories, those moments, those sacred moments,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, and with that, I want to end with this too. Not saying that it's in a negative way, but I was just listening to somebody talking about in our life story when it comes to the end, because one day we will pass on.
Mm,
One day I will be an ancestor. What's that going to be for you? We can't really anticipate it, but like he was talking about the last minute, the very last minute, as you're
mm,
about to take that transition over, you know,
mm.
that place. Because I think about that because my father, when he did, it was a beautiful, amazing thing,
Ah,
you
yeah.
know. And so for us, in our, you know, are we going to like go, oh, I wish I would have did this, or I wish I would have that, or our last minute will it be like, I did good,
Ah,
I did
uh-huh,
good, I told
uh,
a good story with my life,
uh, uh-huh,
you know. And so
uh-huh. Yeah. And that, Gene, just like what you're saying, I'm listening to you because it's, if we think of it, like I've been saying, okay, I'm gonna probably go when I'm 90. So we got 25 years. And so I've been thinking about, well, what do I want to be in the 5 years and the 10 years? And for those of you listening, we have those check marks. We have like
yeah, yeah.
when our kids graduate, we have, we when we get a house. And so some of that, it's, if you can do it earlier, just do it. Just do it. Just do it. And I think the gift of this pandemic and now this epidemic and this coming together, that's why we might be going on vacations. That's why I look at my one little relative who just bought a bunch of acres below the mountain and is going to put a tiny house. She goes, that's all I need. And just whatever the intention is, think about, because with your intentions and your choices, you create your story. And maybe the last thing I'm going to say, because I was like doing this visual of Jolene always, we all say this, but I think of Jolene when she says let it go. And even with people or situations, like if they were a balloon above you with the helium, say it was all your exes from Gallup, no. Or say it was, your siblings or your coworkers or whoever, you could have a big red one for that other president, and you can let it go, but look at the ones that you want to keep
Mm.
and let your intention of your energy be with them. Just like, watching, it's been awesome to see you and Ruby, you know, fall more in love during this, and to be that, and then so I was so then like even like when we're scrolling, um I just thought, oh, I'm gonna let that helium boat go. So I delete, and I'm laughing and I'm coughing at the same time. But I said, I know you have a God, and your God loves you. So goodbye. No, and then, but it's like, and then look at if there's your energy, you might need to bring in
Mm.
new
Yeah.
friendships. New friendships. Maytello always said, make new friends, never choose sides, make new friends. And so, take a risk, make some new friends, take a, like going out hunting. I'm thinking, wow, going out and going hunting, just that adventure, and just, like with this buffalo thing, I'm not quite sure who the designated shooter is, but it's going to be a relative that needs rite of passage. But then my elder was telling me, you need to have a fresh knife that's never been used
Uh,
before. It needs to be a transfer, right? So, I'm learning. I just want it to be a ceremony, not just to kill,
yeah. Yeah.
not just to kill. So whatever you're going after, you could even pray to it now, because I'm like constantly, I'm wearing a buffalo hat. I mean, I'm just whoever that buffalo that's going to sacrifice their life when the tobacco's down. I want it to be a good thing.
Yeah.
I just want it to be a good thing. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Just and again, our hunt with my brother, he suggested it mostly, I think, just for us to be together,
Yeah.
just be together, and it's valuable. That's our value. So with that, we've come to the end of this Wellness Wednesday. You got me thinking more and more, Theta, and just but those of you who joined us, thank you so much for joining us today. Next week we'll be in Great Wolf Lodge in Scottsdale, Arizona, Native Wellness Institute, in person and live. If you have time to come down and check it out, that'd be awesome. We'll probably maybe we might be putting a few things on Zoom just to talk and keep track, checking in with everybody. But thank you so much for being here, Theda. It's always a pleasure to talk and share, and tell your mom thank you for the use of her room.
Yes.
And so we'll sign off for now. Until next time, relatives, take care. Be safe out there. We love you.
See you next Wednesday.